Welcome to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. Show date February 12th, 2017, recorded in downtown Milwaukee. I'm your co-host, Brian Edward, and with me in the studio is co-host Mario Quadracci, and also benefactor and a fan of the Mythicist Milwaukee group. Welcome, Mario.
Excited to be here again.
I'm really excited for our guest today, Michael Shermer. Dr. Michael Shermer, I should say, is the founder of the Skeptic Society and editor-in-chief of Skeptic magazine, which can be found at www.skeptic.com. He's author of many books, including his latest, The Moral Arc in 2015, The Believing Brain in 2011, Why Darwin Matters in 2006, and The Science of Good and Evil, Why People Cheat, Gossip, Care, and Share, and Follow the Golden Rule in 2004, among many others. Once self-described as a fundamentalist Christian and then became an atheist. Also a self-described libertarian and then, I think, backed off on that a little bit in The Moral Arc. So maybe in this world of tricky labels, it may be only safe to say that he is a skeptic and a very prominent one at that. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that. And by the way, today is Darwin Day. February 12th, 1809 is the day that Darwin was born. The same day as Abraham Lincoln, just so you never forget today's Lincoln's birthday.
That's fantastic.
And not just the same date, but the same day. And so we never forget it. And so that's pretty cool.
Right. And I think in the words of Christopher Hitchens, would say that he felt Darwin was the bigger emancipator of the two.
Well, it's, both certainly contributed to the progress of humanity, I would say.
No doubt. Yeah, I think you can't have one without the other. I think, it's the amount of people, the fact that we can be free.
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
Very good. So your latest book, I think, The Moral Arc, 2015, it came out, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, 2015, paperback 2016. And, it's about moral progress, that things are getting better. I know that sounds hallucinatory to some people in these days of constant media coverage of the civil war in Syria and Ferguson and racial tensions and, the Trump administration and all that. But in fact, if we follow the trend lines instead of the headlines, you see that, in fact, things are about as good as they've ever been. I mean, people talk about the homicide rates in Chicago. Yes, there has been an uptick in that, but overall, including in cities like New York, the crime rates and homicide rates are way down. They're at a historic lows. So there, even though there is civil wars like Syria, the number of civil wars ongoing at any given time in the world is the lowest it's ever been since we started keeping track of those sorts of things. Interstate wars are almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. And so there's lots of these, sort of expansions of civil liberties and civil rights to more people in more places. And poverty will be ended worldwide by 2030, according to the United Nations. So, there's much to celebrate and be grateful for, even while we still have to recognize that there are problems to work on.
What could throw us off that arc, if anything? Do you think it's inevitable that we're going to keep moving in this direction, or are there some dangers?
Not inevitable. No, nothing's inevitable. My theory is not a stage theory of history. It could all go south, of course, but not likely. The further down the path you go towards, say, the expansion of civil rights, the abolition of slavery, things like that, the granting of the vote to everyone, all adults, the chance of that getting overturned are pretty slim. I mean, can you imagine any state in the United States or the U.S. Supreme Court deciding to reinstate slavery?
No.
Oh, no, it's not going to happen. Or take the vote away from women. Or as my wife likes to say, you mean take it away from men? And we're like, what?
And part of it, you've won hearts and minds on those issues.
Of progress, yeah. That kind of progress, carries a certain amount of weight and momentum with it as we go further along in history. And yes, of course, I mean, it's possible ISIS could get nuclear weapons and destroy the West, but it's so unlikely. I think it's not something we should obsess about.
Can that progress have its own consequences? In other words, we talk about civil liberties and great individual rights, but now we're in kind of this culture where individualism has become almost this like something that we almost worship, where there's 39 gender pronouns and people want to be known as barcodes, and can that go too far? Has it gone too far?
Well, in fact, what you're referencing there is not actually individualism in the classical liberal sense of individual rights. What you're talking about there is identity politics, and this idea that everyone has to be a member of a group, preferably an oppressed group, and the pronoun business, along with microaggressions and safe spaces and trigger warnings and things like that have been spreading around college campuses. That's really not. It's really anti-enlightenment, anti-individual liberties. It's really, you should be treated as a member of a group, and it's kind of ironic that these institutions that were once at the frontiers of free speech and individual liberty now are at the other end. I mean, they want to suppress speech, kick speakers off of college campuses that have ideas they don't want to hear. And in fact, that's a concern. I think that's gone too far. I understand about language, and not using words like the N-word or even something innocuous like using humanity rather than mankind. I get that. I've changed my writing style to accommodate that, and I think that's fine. But then when you get down to these speech codes, and the University of California last year published a list of microaggressions, things you cannot say on any of these campuses. I mean, it's just absurd. It's a minefield for students, in conversation. I'd be afraid to say anything. For fear of getting busted for something that's politically incorrect. So that, I think these things do go too far. I think it will come swinging back.
Right. I do think FIRE, the group FIRE, is a nonpartisan group that takes a look at codes on college campuses. Only 25% of college campuses do not have at least one restrictive free speech code, according to them.
You're right. Yeah, FIRE is a good group documenting all these sorts of things. I hadn't heard that particular statistic. That is disturbing. That 25% is probably more the private colleges, I'm guessing. Most college, and probably not the most liberal ones. Most colleges are pretty liberal. I teach at Chapman University. I teach one class a semester called Skepticism 101, and Chapman's pretty centrist. So we haven't seen those kinds of things happening that you see, say, at UC Berkeley and UCLA and so on. And there are a few bastions of rights, civil rights and liberties and freedom still on college campuses, but not as many. But I do think these things, again, the pendulum swings back and forth. I think this is the outside of the pendulum swing. I think it'll start going back in now. I think it has to.
You do? Okay. So are identity politics a new phenomenon, or they have always been there and I'm just noticing them now because of social media?
Well, no, I do think it's gained momentum over the last maybe 10 years or so, 10 to 15 years. We've always classified people by groups, so it's just something natural that the human mind does. It's hard not to do it. But elevating it to like a philosophical principle that you're supposed to do and teach in the academy, that, and then like bash people and exclude people that are not part of it, like the Women's March, after the day after the Trump inauguration. I mean, there were conservative women that were not allowed to march. They basically got kicked out because they were pro-life, for example. And, so it wasn't a women's march. It was a women's pro-life only march, or a women's, whatever your identity politics group you want to identify with was promoting. And that's too exclusive, not inclusive. And that, I think, is something new, more than before. Although saying that, I have to admit that most social groups do this. They tend to purge people that don't toe the party line, whether it's the early Marxist groups or early feminist groups. My business partner, who does the art director for Skeptic magazine, Pat Lindsay, she's a little older. She's about a decade older than me, and she went through the feminist movement in the 60s, and she said the same thing happened. It's like, you're reading the wrong books, you're going to the wrong movies, you're not a real feminist. Who's a real feminist? And before you know it, your group is getting smaller and smaller because you keep kicking people out that aren't real members of your group. It's like, wait a minute. And libertarians do the same thing, because they vary so much on different issues, from pot and prostitution to international wars. They're not in total agreement on these things. And so, the moment you say, well, I believe in this. Oh, no, you're not a true libertarian. Out you go. And, so it cuts across. Atheists are a little bit like that. If you're, what kind of atheist are you? Are you a militant atheist? Are you an anti-theist? Or, what? If you're a, wishy-washy agnostic, well, then you're not a real atheist. And, so I think social groups tend to do that, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't help the cause.
Is this basically this instinct kind of a relic of tribalism that's kind of innate in us? I
think so. Yeah, I think the moment you veer too far from the party line, the sense is that we can't count on you as a group member, so we got to kick you out. That's why, like in politics, even in say mainstream politics, like the word flip-flopper, that means you change your mind. Well, it's okay to change your mind, but in certain groups, no, it's not. You can have a little bit of debate in the party, but not too much. If you have too much, that's why it's so rare to see a member of Congress say change parties. It almost never happens. And when it does, it's a huge thing. It'd be like the Pope saying, "I decided I'm not a Catholic anymore." What? I still believe in Jesus, but I'm not a Catholic. Oh, okay. And boy, that would be so rare.
Yeah, it can be an irony, it seems like, of the early women's rights movement. Victoria Woodhull was in the group, but she believed in not only the freedom for women that the rest of the group did, but also in free sex and in free love, and was kind of kicked out for that reason, because this movement was initially religious. So I find it an irony.
And, I would say, I used to think religion was the most divisive institution in human society. I'm thinking maybe politics now, identity politics, is even more divisive. I find more and more that I can talk about religion without too much controversy at the dinner table, so to speak. But politics, oh boy, politics. If I'm in a mixed group of people and I'm not sure what people believe in, I tend to keep my mouth shut.
Absolutely. Not only is it so polarized, but it's so dogmatic on both sides of the equation. You mentioned the pendulum swinging. It seems like there's multiple pendulums kind of swinging in opposite and really extreme directions at this moment.
Yep, I would agree. And at the moment, I'd say politics trumps other beliefs. Like, again, with the Women's March, it wasn't about women, it was about liberals. Liberal, so if you're a conservative woman, you're not invited. So, okay, so that right there tells us it's not a women's march. It's a political march for liberal women. That's really what that was.
Right.
It didn't seem to have like an obvious focus either. I just can't believe that the majority of the women that were there are completely supportive of Linda Saussure.
Right.
There's just no way.
Right. Yes, that's a good point. And in part, I think, there's going to be, many studies over the next several years trying to deconstruct what happened in the 2016 election and how Trump won, even among Republicans. How the hell did this happen? Okay, fine. But I think part of the account is going to have to go into the category of the alternative, what I call the alternative left, or what other people call the regressive left. That is this whole extreme identity politics. If your belief is that you have to categorize people by groups, by their skin color, by what they happen to believe, then it's perfectly reasonable for white nationalists to say, okay, well then that's what we're going to do, and we're going to elect the guy that's the most supportive of white nationalism, and that would be Trump. So the alt-right, and that is kind of the alt-right philosophy, white supremacy and economic nationalism and so on. That's a completely logical response to the regressive left, the far left, the alt, what I call the alt-left, because that's what they do. So that's the danger of setting it up like that instead of treating people as individuals, but as members of groups. Then other groups that feel excluded are going to circle the wagons and create their own political entities and fight back.
It seems like the only American institution where we divide things up regularly on racial lines is prison, which it just seems weird to take that part of that culture and adopt it.
Right. I hadn't thought of that, actually. That's a good analogy there. Right. Yeah. So prison's a little microcosm of how people sort themselves. And that still happens on college campuses, despite the uber liberal attempt to integrate. There's still something of a balkanization of blacks and Hispanics and so forth. And I think in a way some of those campus groups where the Black History Month or the women's movement or whatever, women's studies programs, Black studies programs, this is, I think it's totally understandable why people want to do that, but it does tend to once again push people into those groups rather than encouraging integration and
right. And once
just forgetting that whole collectivist type.
Right. And once they're in the group, this phenomenon now of safe spaces, say, it keeps them isolated and, festering and talking amongst themselves and promoting their own kind of ideologies. And I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's the bubble, right? It's that bubble phenomenon or the echo chamber. Yeah. So there the confirmation bias kicks in. You're only hearing and listening to examples of your oppression or things that piss you off or things that involve your group and not other groups. And it makes it worse. There's one small group at Chapman that has a safe space. It's the LGBTQ community. So I went to one of their meetings. They just posted it. Anyone and everyone's welcome. So I went, and it was a pretty small group, mostly a handful of administrators, and another handful of students. So I just want to know what's this all about, and really what it was just kind of a place where we can hang out and talk about the stuff that's happened to us. So I'm like, okay, give me some examples. So it's like, well, this gay couple on campus were walking on the sidewalks or on the perimeter of the campus. Now, this is down in the city of Orange near Anaheim. So, it's a pretty nice neighborhood. And somebody made a remark from a pickup truck, a nasty remark. It's like,
surprise.
Okay, well, there's just assholes in the world. That's just the way it is. There's people that are not nice. And yes, it would be great if they didn't do that. But do we really need to meet and talk about it?
Right.
And that just kind of reinforces. And then also it leads to the search for other things that might have happened. Like, did that person make a remark, as he passed by, and you start listening for. So then what my fear about this is that innocuous comments people make where they don't mean anything, they just slipped or just they said something they didn't mean that, then that becomes another form of oppression, hate speech, and then it gets talked about and elevated into an incident. And then, so my concern about the well-being of people for going into the future is then you're more focused on being a victim rather than just accomplishing things, just growing up and living your life normally. If you're so focused on the negative, then you're going to miss the positive. Because of course there are negative things. You can't deny that. That people say nasty remarks to blacks or Jews or Hispanics or women or gays or whatever. Yes, I know there are assholes in the world. It's just the way it is. But there aren't as many as there used to be. If you just think about old guys like Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers, and he got ousted for making disparaging remarks about African Americans coming to his games. Well, what he was talking about was them hanging out with his girlfriend, his mistress. Right. He didn't like that. That's really what that was about. But still, you saw what happened to him.
Oh my God.
Most old guys back in the 50s were like him. And now most of them are not like that, and that's progress.
Yeah, that's funny. Brian and I were just having that exact same discussion the other night about him. It was just the mindset of the time, and now it's. That kind of thinking is such an aberration that people they're shocked when they hear anything like that. However, now we're seeing the emergence of this alt-right movement and Trump, who are blatantly saying racist things, and and a lot of people argue that now that Trump is president, it gives kind of license for this. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's true. There are some. The license effect probably does happen. I do wonder about people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Richard Spencer, and their public comments. How many of these do they deep down in their heart really believe, or are they just doing it for effect, just because they know they're going to get a response? They want to put a stick into the beehive, the wasp's nest, and watch what happens. And I've been telling people for 2 years on Twitter, if you really want to punish Milo Yiannopoulos, when he shows up on your campus, just don't go to his talk.
Right.
Because I do a lot of public talks. I speak at universities. I do about a dozen university talks a year. And the worst thing that can happen is no one's there. No one cares that you're on campus. It's like, oh, this is terrible. That's what would do it. The best thing for him is, have a mob show up and shouting and having posters and protests. And, that's what he wants. So I do wonder sometimes if some of these guys just say this stuff just to poke the hornet's nest and watch what happens.
If you go to some of the websites and read their actual histories of themselves, they clearly admit that the whole thing came from troll culture, online troll culture.
Right.
Yeah, and so this is like they're just taking it out of the offline and basically bringing this kind of trolling kind of behavior into the real world, and they're getting a huge response from it.
Yep, they sure do. Well, then there was an article in the LA Times this morning about the UC Berkeley looting and rioting last week when Milo Yiannopoulos showed up and he didn't even get to speak. And it turns out that the 100+ people dressed in black with hoods and face masks that were doing the looting. They were breaking Starbucks windows and bank windows. This had nothing to do with UC Berkeley students. These were outside agitators who just do this. They just go from site to site where there's going to be a Trump rally or a conservative speaker on campus. And they said in this article they organize to do this. And they have a larger agenda that has to do with being anti-globalization, anti-capitalism, and so on. And they're using these students.
And this was the Antifa, right? I mean, this is like the anarchist organization, if you will.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yep, that's right. So these liberal students on these college campuses who are kind of naive about these things, and they're just having fun, like, hey, there's a rally, let's go down and protest. Yeah, that'll be fun. Maybe they don't really mean any harm. They're not going to break windows and stuff. And all of a sudden they get swept up in this mob, and there's these thugs out there dressed in black, and all the pictures are taken, TV cameras are out there, and it kind of makes the UC Berkeley students look really bad. And and I have to admit, when I was watching, I'm like, God, what is with these students? They're committing violence now. It's like, turns out that wasn't the students.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think mace was sprayed in someone's face. There was another person that was unconscious for being hit over the head. I mean, there was real violence.
Right. I am curious why there were no arrests made in that particular case. It could be because these guys are good enough to disguise themselves and then run away before the police can actually take any not prisoners, whatever, just arrest anyone. And so because that, this wasn't protesting, this was just looting and rioting, and that is totally illegal.
When you were writing the book, researching the book, did you have any inkling that this was going to be the next kind of step along the way, along the moral arc?
I've been surprised like everyone else. Let me tell you, I'll tell you a little anecdote. When I was watching on election night, we were toggling back and forth between CNN and Fox News just to see the differences on the election coverage. And at 9:00 California time, it was like 8:45 California time. So this is 11:45 in the evening on the East Coast. And on Fox News, Bill O'Reilly had Charles Krauthammer, and he is like their political expert. This guy knows more about politics than I'll ever know in 10 lifetimes. And, just as they were going off the air, he says, Charles, call it for us. And he says, Hillary's going to win. And then it's like, what happened? I mean, so, what do I know? I mean, what does anybody know? I mean, it's like, come on. It's just so hard to predict.
Wow. Yeah, I think Ben Shapiro says he's out of the prediction business for sure. He recently came. It is a conservative speaker, which I mean, I think Milo, and Spencer certainly provocateurs, whereas Shapiro tends to be more a conservative commentator only. But yet we thought in Milwaukee, when he was here, there might be these same riots and protests because that it was found that some of the teachers were telling students. And this is faculty telling students reserve seats, then don't come. So the fact that student protest is one thing, but a faculty trying to get in, it just seems weird. But yet nothing happened. It went off without a hitch.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I was going to watch the live stream of that, and then but I had to teach. I think that was a Thursday night when I teach. So that went okay. Yeah, Shapiro, I watched him a few times, and he seems pretty sharp. articulate and fairly reasonable. I think he believes what he says, and he's not out to stir the hornet's nest just for the sake of it. But even so, like I tweeted a couple things about his live stream a few weeks ago. Like, hey, this guy's making sense about this and that, and I got bombarded by my liberal followers. Shermer, you've gone off the deep end. You've jumped the shark. You endorsed Ben Shapiro. It's like, endorsed him. I just said, hey, I like what this guy said about X. That doesn't mean I like what he said about Y or Z or whatever.
Right, because he's an Orthodox Jew, very pro-life. I mean, I don't know where you stand on those, but I certainly know you're not pro-orthodoxy in religion.
No, I'm not. No, I'm an atheist, and I'm pro-choice. Technically speaking, I personally would not go. I would not have I wouldn't have an abortion, but I would not, with my wife, have an abortion. I wouldn't do it. So I'm against abortion in that sense. But and the argument I made in the moral arc is that I'm pro-choice because although recognizing that a fetus is a living thing, a potential human being, and so on, there's no place to draw the line. And historically, states and men ruling it over women has always worked against women's civil liberties and civil rights. So I come down on the side of women's freedom to choose and have more political rights than not on that particular issue, even while recognizing that it's not a simple black and white kind of thing. So, and then I'm in favor of gay marriage, and Shapiro appears not to be. I'm not sure why, because he's sometimes says he's a libertarian, or he likes that approach, a libertarian. And he says, if you want to get gay, if you're gay and you want to get married, I don't care, but I wouldn't do it. Okay, fine. Well, me neither, because I'm straight. But I think he means more than that. He although he says the state shouldn't be in the marriage business, I agree. That's a libertarian argument. So I'm not really sure where he stands exactly on that particular one.
With someone who's formally trained in psychology, I have to ask, when our president says something that's so blatantly fallacious, and what's going on? Is this a strategy, or is this indicative of, as others have maybe pointed out, that he is actually mentally unstable? There's something wrong with him? What's going on here?
It may not be either of those. I don't think he's mentally unstable. No, I think he has strong narcissistic leanings, huge ego, and that he's got a short trigger, short fuse on his trigger, and he just says stuff that pops into his head, and then probably reassesses later. I don't know. The alternative facts thing, fake news stuff. That is disturbing. I don't think it's the end of the world. And what was the politician yesterday? I think that was saying we need it was Biden, but no, not Biden. Who was it that's saying we need a government to step in and do something about alternative news and fake news and stuff, and it has to be taught to students. It was like, what? We need a minister of truth, like
Whoa.
George Orwell.
Yeah, that's
come on.
Yeah, right.
This is crazy. I mean, yes, there's, the people, it's a problem, but it's not the end of the world. So Trump, just, tranquillo everyone. I think it's going to be okay. Already you've seen with the travel ban, there's enough checks and balances to keep things from getting, completely out of control. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be okay.
So much of this you are thinking is kind of an overreaction. I know Samantha Bee had a piece out that, questioning, and there was others that his reading level is very low. And I don't know if you made anything of that.
Yeah, I don't think he's a big reader.
No.
He says he watches a lot of television. You can tell he watches a lot of television. He's always commenting on stuff from CNN and of course Fox. But again, these things can work the other way. In the New York Times this morning, Maureen Dowd's op-ed piece was on like every time Trump says something disparaging about the New York Times, their subscriptions go up. Mm-hmm. And he's been disparaging Alex Baldwin, portraying him on Saturday Night Live, and Saturday Night Live's ratings are the highest they've been in 20 years. So
the Milo effect in reverse.
Yeah, so it's at least they're talking about you. So maybe it's okay. I mean, it is a little weird to have the president of the United States doing stuff like that. I mean, I don't think anyone in the past has ever done anything quite like that. Although someone did show the famous letter from Harry Truman He wrote a letter to the newspaper that gave his daughter a bad review about her. I think she was a singer or dancer or something, and she did a performance somewhere, and they panned her, and he wrote the guy that did the reviewer and told him he better get some beefsteaks for his black eyes and a cup for his because he's gonna pound this guy into the ground. It's like,
Sheesh.
The president of the United States is threatening violence against a reviewer.
Good.
So
Wow.
Sometimes people get upset and say stuff, but they're not going to really do anything.
Did you happen to see there was an op-ed in the New York Times last week from a conservative talk show radio host that's actually based here in Milwaukee? His name's Charlie Sykes. And it trended pretty well. Basically, he was making the case, or actually apologizing for basically creating this atmosphere where the truth no longer matters. And I want to read you a quote from that article and see what you think. It says, "We thought we were creating a savvier, more skeptical audience. Instead, we opened the door for President Trump, who found an audience that can be easily misled." So has skepticism, this kind of skepticism of the media and just kind of the general perception of reality, turned into this kind of rejection of reality itself?
Yeah, well, I read that piece. I thought it was enlightening because he says he's a conservative and maybe we've gone too far. And it's true. I mean, I listen to conservative talk radio in between books on tape and great lectures from the teaching company and so on when I'm driving around. LA traffic, we have a lot of time in the car. And so, yeah, I mean, they just pound the other side so much. And I know that they're piling on facts that are not either distorting or not true in one direction. And yeah, so we shouldn't be surprised when it goes the other way. Again, the alt-right is matched by the alt-left now. And you got Trump for that. So congratulations, good job.
Right.
And that's what he was saying, and I thought that was very insightful. It's
and
like,
honest.
That's right.
Yeah,
and honest. Yeah, very rare. Yeah, I'd be surprised to hear someone like Bill O'Reilly admit to something like that. Maybe he's got too big a platform to admit that. Maybe he took things too far. But yeah, that takes a lot of intellectual courage to say that. I was impressed.
Oh, I was shocked because I know Charlie pretty well, and our views are definitely different on most matters. So I was shocked to have read that piece.
Yeah, well, so that's kind of good. I mean, there's pushback. And so again, I think there's enough of these kinds of checks and balances, both in government and in private life, that nothing's going to get too crazy. The country's going to go on. It's not the end of Western civilization as we know it or anything like that. Not from Trump, not from ISIS. I don't think terrorism is an existential threat. Global warming, I don't think, is an existential threat. I mean, most of these things that we panic about, we end up doing something about, and life goes on. And I think that'll continue to be the case.
Even with something like AI or...
And I'm not, including AI and especially AI, you can always pull the plug. This idea. Here's the problem with these kinds of arguments. They're based and premised on this if-then chain of arguments. If this happens, then that happens, and then if this happens, then that happens, and then if this happens, 20 steps later, and the world ends. It's like, yeah, but we had 20 places along the way where we can say, wait, stop, we're not going to do that. And that's true with AI too. I don't think, even the big guns like Google and IBM that work on artificial intelligence, they're actually doing it. They're not panicking. Google even joked about creating a big red button to push if the computer gets too smart or too powerful. And that's true with terrorism too. I don't think. Even in worst case scenario, ISIS gets a nuke, a dirty bomb, or an actual nuclear weapon, and they drop it in New York City, kills 5 million people or something. That would be catastrophic. But it's not like the president of the United States is going to turn the keys over to the White House to the ISIS leader. This is not going to happen.
He might not turn them over to anybody.
And it seems like science and political, like left and right, the right is seeing terrorism and ISIS and kind of the jihad and as the existential threat, whereas the left, for the most part, would say climate change and the fact that we're talking about as he can get rid of the EPA or really scale them down. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And why can't we get to the science of? It seems like of all obscured facts, climate change seems to be the biggest one. It's so hard to get to.
It is because the facts aren't important to people. What they want to know is, how does this affect my deepest ideologies about government and the economy? So in this particular case, it's mostly economic. If you are, say, a free market capitalist and you believe in deregulation and keeping government out of industry, the fear is that if global warming is real, then the government's going to step in and do a Manhattan Project-sized curtailment of industry and organized efforts to reduce, greenhouse gases and so on. Therefore, I have to be against it because I'm against those kinds of economic measures. And so then the facts about climate change, ice core data, tree ring data, whatever, parts per million of greenhouse gases, all that's irrelevant. I just want to know is, can I build that pipeline? Can I do the thing I want to do? Or, the market's going to be as free as possible, whatever it is you believe. So we really need to separate facts from the ideology. And so my approach on this to my conservative friends is to say, hey, look, here's a great opportunity to make a boatload of money. Investments, IPOs in green technologies, windmill companies, solar companies, Tesla. I mean, I have Tesla. I drive a Tesla, but I also have Tesla stock. And it's been great, even though the company is, it's hard to say if it's going to survive. I think it probably will, but it's hard to get a automobile company to compete with the big guys. But the effect that Elon Musk has had, even if he goes out of business, is that he's forced all the automobile companies to get with the program on building batteries that can take you 200 to 300 miles in a single charge, and make nice cars that aren't ugly little boxes.
They beat the shit out of Lamborghinis.
30 miles on a charge, And the fact is, there were in 1900 to 1910. There were as many electric taxis in New York City as there were gasoline internal combustion engine taxis. They were competing fairly. There were charging stations. Imagine where we'd be with a century of research and technology in electric cars. It's going to happen now because Musk forced the hand of the big guys. Now they're all making Ford, GM, Porsche, BMW. They're all making starting to make great cars now. All electric, fast, that go 300 miles on a charge. And that's going to be the end of the internal combustion engine. I'm predicting that by 2050 to 2060 or so, that people will go to racetracks to drive an old gas guzzling car just for fun, or they'll take them out in the mountains like guys do with their motorcycles on the weekends. The old Harley Davidson thing, just for fun.
Hear the sound of the engine and feel the rumble.
Yeah. Because there's value in that. People like that. Okay, that's great. But but in fact, electric cars will take it. So my point is that we can solve the greenhouse or the climate change issues technologically, scientifically, economically, that there's, it's just what we do. We've always solved problems, humans, and I think we can keep doing that.
But in general, aren't you, as someone whose basically entire career is trying to convince people that the scientific enterprise is not only a reliable one, but one that we should be investing in as probably the greatest path to truth. Isn't it just getting harder for you to do your job at this point? How do you convince people that there is value in this, that there are facts, that there are alternative facts are not facts, that type of thing?
Right. Yeah, it's hard and frustrating because, I think the evidence is very strong for climate change is real, global warming is real, and it's primarily human caused. I think there's no question about that. So the approach, again, I take is let's separate those questions from what should we do about it. And that's a different question. You don't have to take a liberal, progressive, whatever stand on that. You can find solutions to the problems from a conservative point of view. We should all work on this together.
And, it seems like we're having the wrong debate. Right. Like what should we do about it? Because you can't wreck the economy in order to get green energy. I get that there needs to be a balance.
Right. When I read economists' evaluations of this issue, they point out, that economics is all about the reallocation of resources that are scarce. All resources are scarce. So you only have so much money to go around. How many trillions do we spend on lowering greenhouse gases by 2100? Toward what end? If it's saving lives, well, you could do the kind of stuff Bill Gates does, which is, get mosquito nets and potable water and vitamins and food, and, just basic needs to people in Africa, and you're going to save a lot more lives than lowering greenhouse gases, say. So it's always a balancing act, and that's why I think we could get more effect by motivating people to want to drive electric cars, to want to have solar panels on their roofs, particularly in the Western United States. I mean, we have endless sunshine and almost no one has solar panels. Come on. And, so I like those kinds of solutions.
We need like, in order to have that, right? Is that where the batteries come in? Because you can't just, solar is going to be on in the day, but not in the night. And you can't just, you have to keep the system primed. So would we need huge batteries?
Right. That's the other company Musk has. And again, once Musk starts making money on all these things, everybody's going to be on it. He's going to have so much competition, he is going to make his head spin. And therefore, that'll drive the price down. So every house will come with a battery, a wall-sized battery in the garage to store all that daytime solar energy for use at night. And that's what'll happen. It will happen. It's super expensive now, just like Teslas are $100,000. It's too much. But he's going to have a $35,000 car. Then everyone else is going to have a $35,000 electric car that goes 300 miles and it's fun to drive. And that's so the market forces will bring about change much more rapidly than I think government programs will. But maybe we need some of both. That's why I like the cap and trade program. That you can still have your industry, you can still have your business, make money, but here are the restrictions, because there's always restrictions anyway.
So it encourages companies to invest in this, or be more efficient.
Right.
Scientists are obviously maybe a little worried about what's happening, and you're seeing these data collections and stuff like that, and you're also seeing scientists becoming more politicized in general. There's that big march that's coming up. I think in your state, there's now a scientist, Ph.D., running for a Senate seat on a scientific platform. What do you make of that, scientists getting politicized?
Oh, I think it's interesting. It's probably not something I'll do, because I'm not sure how active I want to be in politics. It's such a nasty business. I don't know why anybody would want to be president of the United States. Everyone hates you. It's like, you got to have super thick skin. Anyway, but the science, the science march is cool. That's great. I'll probably do something that day, maybe here in LA. And, it's just kind of a way of bringing attention, signaling to people that, hey, we're here too, and it matters. And particularly, science and technology, that's the age we live in. And this is what makes the modern world what it is. And, just turn off people's social media for a day and, it would be panic mode time. So I think something like that is just a way of reminding people about that and to signal that you're into it too.
Michael, one of the other pieces where I feel politics and science kind of blend together is the question on trans. Like, what is this a construct, or are there real biological forces at play? Because it seems like it makes a lot of sense to just be nice to trans people, but it's different when you have to redefine gender. And I think that's where a lot of this hubbub's coming around. What do you make on this argument?
Yeah, well, okay, so much of it's exaggerated. I mean, 99.9%, whatever, everybody born is male or female, and that's pretty much biologically determined between genes and hormones and in the womb conditions and so forth. Think of it as fuzzy sets. The two major fuzzy sets are men and women, but there's a little. The fuzzy part, the borders, there's some that are, in between there, bisexual. Well, okay. So we have to also distinguish between gender and sexual orientation or preference, whatever, who do you like to have sex with? Who are you attracted to versus who are you? So those are two separate things. And again, most people are straight, but a small percentage, maybe 1 to 3, maybe 5% are homosexual, and then an even smaller percent of that are bi or whatever. And also those fuzzy sets change over time. There's the famous little category of LUG, LUG, lesbian until graduation. It's a little college phenomenon. And so this is why my concern about trans kids or early teens talking about getting surgery or hormonal treatments or whatever. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You may feel completely differently when you're 25 and think, what was I doing? Why didn't any of my friends or family step in and say something? My God. So I do worry about it, do whatever you want for, today, tomorrow, for the next couple of weeks or months or whatever, as long as, you can change your mind later or no one's hurt. So I'm a big libertarian when it comes to individual choice and live your life however you want. I don't care, but if you start doing things that affect others or do something as dramatic as, a surgery, I mean, those are huge things, and or even hormonal treatment that has effects. real lasting effects on people. So I am concerned about that. Where are the parents? I don't think this necessarily the state should step in, but certainly parents should have some say about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in order to get reassignment surgery, you have to have a team of clinicians that are okaying it. Like me or you couldn't just walk in and get that right now. But it seems that, things like staying off puberty, you can have drugs that will delay puberty. And it seems like, these are tough medical decisions that seem that they're rushing forward. And normally pediatrics is in a very conservative field because people don't want to experiment on kids. It's not right to. It becomes a tricky argument. And it seems like just radically redefining gender is not necessarily the way to do it.
Yes, and because back to the identity politics, even if it's, say, 0.01% of the population is in one of these transgender categories, whichever one, and their voice now gets equal hearing as everybody else's, and it makes it seem like there's a lot of people out there. It's a huge category, and it's not a huge category, and it's just getting a lot more play than it probably really should in terms of proportionality. Again, with gays and lesbians, LGBTQ, go ahead, the whole cohort, it's still a pretty small number. Now, it's enough that, of course, everyone should have their own civil rights and live however they want. Mm-hmm. But the emphasis in the media of talking about it makes it seem like there's a lot more than there probably is. And it was interesting writing the moral arc, about in that chapter on gay rights, how many are there? And it's actually not that simple to tell, because it's mostly self-report data. Right. And, so maybe, again, like the lug thing, people change their mind. I used to be gay, now I'm not. Okay, so that alone tells us there's a certain fluidity to some of this, some perhaps. And then, maybe you weren't gay all your life, just part of it. And maybe you are, but what's the percentage, And so I've seen numbers 1 to 10%, and that's a huge range. That's 100% range from 1 to 10, and that's a lot. So how can it vary that much?
What you want to deny? I imagine, if that survey would have called Ted Haggard, would he have admitted anything?
Exactly. Of course, he'd deny it. He'd deny it so much the pollster would go away. Methinks she doesn't protest too much. There's actually interesting research on that. Oh gosh, this is an incredible study. There's this little device called a piezoelectric. Yeah, the piezoelectric thing that measures a penis getting erect at night to see if you have problems in that area. And so they strapped these guys up to this thing while they watched porn. Now, straight guys watching straight porn, boom, the thing just lights up. And then, straight guys watching gay porn, gay guys porn, not so much, not at all. But the guys who reported being against gays and against gay marriage, and so in other words, they were probably pretty homophobic. They actually responded to the gay guy porn. The little meter lit up. Their little guy down there was responding. So it was one of these studies that actually backed up that little meme that if you're extremely homophobic, you may actually be one.
That is great.
Yeah. And even that, because the culture has been the way it is, anti-gay for so long, that it doesn't allow someone like a Ted Haggard to come out of the closet and go, hey, I like guys. So, that's who I am. But his religion doesn't allow it. So, this is a problem for religion on religion's shoulders.
That's a good point. So, yeah, if Ted Haggard being straight is a myth, which is certainly true, we are going to flip to our myth of the day by Antonio. Our segment, take it away, Antonio. What's our myth of the day?
Thank you. Our myth of the day is brought to you by Romulus, a pre-Christian BC-era god. Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome and son of Mars, is born of a Vestal virgin sworn to celibacy. His mother claims that the divine impregnated her, yet it is not believed by the king. Romulus and his twin brother Remus are tossed into the river and left for dead, which parallels that of Matthew 2:13-16, the slaughter of the innocents. Romulus is hailed as the Son of God. He is, quote, snatched away to heaven by a whirlwind. It is assumed that the gods took him in and he has made post-mortem appearances. Plutarch writes, quote, "He disappeared on the Nonus of July, as they now call the month, which was Quintilis, leaving nothing of certainty to be related of his death. Only the time, Romulus, he vanished, left neither the least part of his body nor any remnant of his clothes to be seen. The senators suffered them not to search or busy themselves about the matter, but commanded them to honor and worship Romulus as one taken up to the gods." In another quote, Plutarch states that Romulus is deified and is known afterwards as Quirinus, a god which belonged to the archaic triad, a triple deity similar to the concept of the Trinity, and that is our myth of the day.
And we here at Mythicist Milwaukee are always looking into the historical roots of religions as well as figures in religion. And Michael, since we are the Mythicist Milwaukee show, and we often ask this, I mean, do you get into the mythicist argument specifically for Jesus Christ? Do you have a position? Do you enjoy that argument, looking into it?
I sure do. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that story you just read. It's true. I've written about this, the commonalities in pre-Christian myths that you can clearly see were adopted by Christians. And this, the virgin birth, Hitch wrote about this, the virgin birth, the resurrection, these things are not original to Christianity. And so we should not be surprised when other religions adopt them. There's something compelling about, the individual stands out more if, he has special circumstances about his birth. That kind of thing is pretty common in history. I think, my general position on this is probably Jesus existed, was probably crucified. Romans crucified everybody for anything. I mean, just remember the two people on either side of Jesus when he was crucified were petty criminals, I think pickpockets or something. So that's pretty common. So, and those are the kinds of questions you could ask historically, scientifically, archaeologically, whatever. Did Jesus exist? Was he crucified? But the next step is a different category of epistemology. Did he die for your sins?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how would you prove that? That's not a testable claim. It's not the kind of thing we can evaluate through science and reason. It's just you either believe it or you don't, and that pretty much depends on how you were born and raised and what your influences were. And if you're born and raised in India, you're not likely to believe that. You're likely to believe in Ganesha, the blue-headed elephant god that also has a lot of the similarities to the Jesus story, and but different enough that people born there aren't going to believe in Christianity. So that tells us that religion is socially constructed based on where you happen to have been born and raised. There's no physics, Indian physics, American physics, British physics. There's just physics. But that's not the case with religion. And because they're dealing with a different kind of reality. It's a reality that's constructed entirely whole cloth out of people's minds. And to that extent, it does. People act on their beliefs. So to that extent, God is real in the minds of people that believe in God, and they act on it. Mm-hmm. And that's what concerns me.
Speaking of acting on their beliefs, I wonder what you make of the hordes of evangelicals that turned out in support of Trump, being that the man shows absolutely no similarities to the archetype of Christ.
Yeah, I was joking before the election, the day after the election, that evangelicals may have elected the first atheist president. No, I don't think he's an atheist. No, probably not. But I have a feeling that Trump hasn't really thought through any of that very much. He probably goes to church probably went to church over the years for either convenience, whoever his wife was, or his business partners, or people he was, politicians or, contacts in New York City that, it's good to hang out with. And you go out after the church service and you have drinks and talk about business. In other words, it was more of a convenience, practical thing for him. I doubt seriously he's thought much about any of these things.
When we're thinking about there's religion and versus irreligion, what do you think? Is new atheism gone away? Is it balkanized? What's the future of the movement if there is such a thing?
Well, again, you have to remember atheism isn't a thing. It's just no belief in God. In terms of positive assertions, well, what is it we do believe? Really, it's humanism, or Enlightenment humanism, as I call it, or secular humanism. And this is a much bigger category. This is the fastest growing religious group in America are the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, the people that tick the box nun for religious affiliation on these surveys. That's 1 out of 5 of everybody and 1 out of 3 of millennials born after 1980. They're the ones that they're not necessarily atheists or agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, whatever. They just don't have religion. A lot of them I know support people like Deepak Chopra, that kind of new age, cosmic consciousness. There's a force in the universe, that kind of airy fairy thing that makes people feel good and empowers them to feel spiritual in some way, but that has nothing to do with religion. And I think that's the future. I think there's not much future in calling yourself an atheist. I mean, I think the atheism thing will come secondarily after rejecting religion. Well, what do I believe in? I believe in civil rights, civil liberties, love, whatever. You end up being a humanist. You're not religious. Maybe you don't call yourself anything, and then you just don't believe. And maybe somebody forces you to pick a label. But for the most part, most people are not, like Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens and me, just talking publicly about it. Most people are quiet about their religious beliefs. They just don't talk about it. And I think that's probably the future. That'll be a much bigger group of people that just don't believe anymore, and they just don't talk about it.
Speaking of people like Deepak Chopra, who, kind of use this pseudoscientific woo-woo spirituality. And yeah, it is woo. I mean, it is, right? And I've heard you actually use that word to describe it.
Yes, I have used that word, but I have to say I've gotten to know Deepak over the past couple of years pretty well, and I actually like him. He's a good guy. We're friends. He means everything he says. He's not BSing people to sell books or whatever. He's not. He's got more money. He knows what to do with. He doesn't need the money, and he doesn't live an opulent life. He dresses down. He doesn't drive a fancy car. He doesn't fly private. He really. And I know he really believes it because he's always working on me at lunch, dinner, when we're alone. He's telling me about some new study in quantum physics that shows that the Buddhist position is correct about this thing here on consciousness, whatever. He's constantly working on me. And
is he moving you?
No, he's not moving me. No, I'm still skeptical. But I did go to his center, the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California. It's this really nice resort. And I have to say, it was great. But how could it not be? You're at this beachside resort getting massaged, eating great meals, meditating. I mean, it's, how could you not feel better? And I don't think this has any. I don't think you have to buy into any of the cosmic quantum consciousness stuff to get the benefit of that. I think anybody would. And we do know, Deepak aside, that meditation does help. I mean, it lowers blood pressure. It reduces the amount of thought flooding that leads to stress hormones. Thought flooding, you're sitting there stewing on your boss or whatever, that somebody that pissed you off. And, that we know from when you do that the stress hormones flow through your veins and they have negative effects. And that kind of lifestyle that Deepak promotes it is healthy. It is good.
So we can be friends with our ideological differences here. That's what I think is good. I think you were on with Sam Harris and Deepak, and it looked like you guys were getting into it. So it's good to know that you guys are friends and still talk to each other. That was
probably the height of me and Deepak's non-friendship.
He blamed you for it got comical towards the end. Like he stub his toe, and it would be because of Michael Shermer.
Yes.
How did that get better? Did someone reach out?
Oh, just communicate. Well, he reached out to me more than the other direction. And then last year, what really brought around last year is he and my wife started communicating in a friendly way. And he invited us, when she was pregnant, invited us to come down, and they have their little pregnancy weekend kind of thing or whatever at the Chopra Center. I thought, yeah, okay, let's just go do it. I mean, I'll take my bike, I'll go riding along the beach, and it'll be fun, get massages and meditate and eat great food, but I also wanted to get the lectures. They give you these little talks about so-called Vedic science and Ayurvedic medicine. And really what it is kind of the Eastern Buddhist approach to life. It's not medicine, really. It's really just lifestyle. And for the most part, it's like, yeah, this is pretty healthy. This is, pretty good way to live. And as Deepak always tells me, you don't have to believe any of this to get the benefits. Like, okay. For me, meditation is probably mostly just, as they say, thinking with your eyes closed. It does take some experience and practice, to really stop the thought flooding. If you sit there pretending to meditate, but you're thinking about where you're going to be next hour and when your mortgage is due, and my boss really makes me mad. You're not meditating.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that for any of us. And people like Sam Harris, my friend who does this, he's been doing this for like 30 years or something. And I know he's doing something different than when I try to do it, and that he's getting the real beneficial effects. And he doesn't believe in any of the Deepak stuff either, but that the meditation is still good.
Does it bother you at all that the people are being led into those benefits, but they might be believing all this kind of cosmic woo-woo stuff?
Well, yes. I mean, the closer we are to reality, the better, and some of that kind of pushes the boundaries. Some of it is on the boundaries where we just don't know. We don't have a good theory of consciousness yet, so that kind of opens the door for that sort of thing. But at least they're not flying planes into buildings. Right. They're not blowing themselves up. They're not attacking abortion clinics. They're not crazy people. So I don't worry about them. I really don't.
So at some point, you can compromise, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And that's better for the world if we can do that.
Right. And the fact that you can get back amicable with Deepak, I mean, it seems like maybe there's some hope for the future that those that have been Facebook defriended or have defriended others, that may be a temporary situation.
This defriending thing and blocking people on social media. God, I've never done that. And I've had people do it to me. I didn't even know that I had it done to me. It's like, what? Why? What? I mean, come on. This is just so insane. This is this is part of the problem. I'm protesting people being nasty to each other, so I'm going to block you. What? Okay. People don't seem to see the irony or the hypocrisy in any of that.
No, without a doubt. So that's why I thought it would be a good place to end there. That's kind of neat because Mario and I were talking. Wow, those two can't be friends, and now that we know that you are, that great story. We like that.
Yeah.
So Michael Shermer, thanks so much for coming
You're
on.
welcome.
We really appreciate your time and thought in science, politics, skepticism, a little bit across the board.
Keep doing your thing. It's been great.
And we didn't actually get to talk about Islam at all, so we'll leave that for another date. But we will have the folks know, and Michael Shermer as well, that on September 30th, 2007, we're having a debate between Azura Nermani and Faisal Al-Muhtar as the Buv's Belief portion of the MythCon, or Myth Information Conference 4. So reserve the date now. That's going to be a good one. Titled right now, Islam in the Age of Trump and What to Do. So it's going to be great. It's going to be fair. It's going to be skeptical. All fair points of view to be heard, and we want you to come. It's going to be a really good time. Also, Melissa Chen is going to be speaking. Armored Skeptic from YouTube fame and others. So join us, and we hope you chime in on that, Michael. And appreciate your time.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.
Joining me right now is Sean Frasick, the president of Mythicist Milwaukee, who is out in L.A., California recently to meet up with Jill Michelle Melian.
That's correct.
And went with a couple other Mythicist Milwaukee members. Tell us about your trip out there.
Yeah, so we went out with Adam Money, our videographer, Adam in the Wild, and Joseph Kyle Richards, our filmmaker. And Jill Michelle Melian, she invited us out to attend her 1 hour.
Who is that again?
She was on the show. She was with Mad TV, Reno 911, Curb Your Enthusiasm, but she's making a new movie, This Is Meg. So she invited us, after we did the podcast, she invited us out there to do the 1 hour live filming of her 1 hour special that's coming out soon. And yeah, it was great. We got to go there. We got to see her. She was just fantastic on stage. She actually, talked with us a little bit after, and we got to talk to Alex Ferrari, who's the director of This Is Meg. And Deborah Wilson was there, Carlos Alazraqui, there's Mad TV, Reno 911 people. It was just really, really fun time, but I was really excited to see having them invite us out there, knowing what we did, knowing what we do. It was just a really cool opportunity for us. And, I thank all of them, and it was fantastic. I had fun. Joseph had fun. He learned a lot. Adam learned a lot from their video guys, because they were recording this for Hulu and Netflix. So yeah, it was just really, really fun. I just wanted to come on and thank her personally, and hopefully we can work with her in the future, maybe bring her to some of our events. And we have some ideas in the works, and there'll be some more info in the future.
Okay, and we appreciate that. She's supportive, and the idea is that to normalize the non-religion. Is that?
Yeah,
I think if people asked, why are you working with comedians? as opposed to, say, Michael Shermer, who was kind of in the movement, so to speak. Why this one?
I think, personally, I think there is an identity crisis in atheism right now. I think that there's people that see it a certain way. There's people that see it another way. I see it in the way of, involving people that do have mainstream audiences to showcase that this is not a big topic. It should be a, who cares if you say you're an atheist or a secularist or an agnostic? That should be the response, instead of people having this automatic judging, taboo, negative outlook on you as a person if you say, well, I'm an atheist. It should be, and I think comedy ties that in perfectly. There's a lot of comedians that talk to it, and Jill actually did a bit on Jesus. It was really good. When that's out, we'll share it when they release it on Netflix. But it was really, really good bit. But I think comedy cuts through that, and it can cut through the taboos that exist, and having these personalities interested in this realm and supporting it. I think that's awesome, and it's something we can offer that's unique that other organizations haven't. We really haven't gotten to that point yet. So that's how I see the tie-in.
So you kind of it normalizes it. We all want to be normal, and it's okay to joke about religion. It's okay to joke about atheism.
Correct. That's correct. So, yeah, super excited. Hopefully we can continue to work with people. It sounds like Carlos Alazraki and Deborah Wilson may be coming on the show. I'm really excited to work with them. And it was really, really inspiring for me personally to go out there knowing these people. 60 people got turned away at the show, and we made the list, and, Jilly was really emotional at the end, just so happy that all those people showed up and supporting her. And I was honored to be there as one of those people, because she just did a fantastic job. And
what was she like in person? Did you get backstage or?
Yeah, well, it was more. They did at the Hollywood Improv at the Lab, which is right next to the Improv. It's like the same building, but just a different theater. And she did 2 shows, one at 7:30, one at 9:30. We went to the one at 9:30, and she had the hall until 2 a.m. So she did her 1 hour, and then like around 10:30, 11 or so, then people we're just hanging out, having drinks, talking, and we got to talk to all these people, which is like mind-boggling for me.
What was she like? Was she hilarious? Was she cracking jokes?
She's super funny and just super genuinely just a great person. Like, she's just talking to us about what we do, and just excited and happy, and just, you can tell she's just a hard worker. And that's one of the things that I really take away from her, is just how hard she works. This is someone that was on major shows that it still busts her ass all the time, and showcases why you need to keep working and doing what you're doing if you really love it, and success will come, as a result. But you can tell she loves what she does, and she just has great friends and great people around her. So it was just awesome. Just a great time.
Well, great. Well, we appreciate you coming on and talking about that and giving us that personal aspect. Everyone should check out Jill Michelle Melian on Mad TV, as well as on YouTube. You can Google it out.
She's not on Mad TV anymore, but she's on YouTube. She has her Stop It show. She has the This Is Meg coming out, and this 1 hour special will be coming out soon. So just keep an eye on her, JillyOnline.com.
Of Mad TV fame.
Of Mad TV, yeah. But yeah, check JillyOnline.com. All of her stuff's there. And Alex Ferrari, IndieFilmHustle.com. He has a podcast there. And if you are a filmmaker that is working on a small budget, he has some great tips and tricks there. So it was fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. The Mythicist Milwaukee Show is brought to you by Mythicist Milwaukee. Producer Sean Freisig, Associate Producer Fritz Blandone, Engineer Jason Lawson, and hosts Brian Edward and Jacob Wolfel. Every week we produce a new broadcast that sheds light on religion, secularism, and mythology. If you enjoy this show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/mythicist. Closing theme written and performed by Shelley Siegel.